Welcome to Beyond the Helmet, hashtag BTH Pod, in case you're looking on social media. Today, man, I'm with someone that played football, but by no means is just an athlete or a former athlete. It's none other, though, than the former All-Pro, Pro Bowl defensive lineman, Bubba Baker, who, of course, now is the single-season sack record holder. I don't care if they're saying that's officially or unofficially, but Bubba, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you, man. I'm honored to be here.
It's an honor to have you on. We've been chatting for a little bit here before we jumped into it, and clearly you're so much more than someone that used to play a sport. One of the coolest things, in my opinion, is to talk to someone that has some distance from a certain chapter of their life, because they can reflect on it and think about it in a different way. And not only are you capable, more than capable of doing that, but you've also reinvented yourself and tried different things in your time since being an athlete. So you have such a truly unique perspective. I don't even really know where to start, but first I just wanted to say congratulations on finally being recognized for your accomplishments, even if they were just a couple of years ago.
Hey, it's flattering, and anytime your name comes up in the Hall of Fame in the pro football conversation, you need to be humbled and honored. No question about it. And you can't even have that conversation without mentioning Bill Gay and John Woodcock and Dave Purefoy and Doug English, who played right next to me. But more importantly, the guy that made Bubba Baker, Floyd Peters. Even to this day, I think my middle name is a four-letter word, because of the way he pushed me. And I say this jokingly, but I mean it. He rode me like a mule. He treated me and all 7 or 8 of us differently. And at 19, going on 20, Steve, I couldn't understand why that guy treated me the way he did, and I hated him for it. I talked about this my entire after career until he got Alzheimer's, and I decided to give him a call out there in Lake Tahoe, and he came back for about 10 minutes, and he explained to me why. And he said, I saw something in you that nobody else in the room had, and I needed to bring it out in you. And I didn't give up. What you thought? And boom, the light went off. Then Doug English called me, and he and I were on the phone, and Doug was like, yeah, man. He said, Al, Floyd loved you like a son. He said, he just needed to bring that out in you. And he said, and he did. And I never knew that. All I ever knew is the guy said things to me that if somebody was said to me on the field, on the street, I would have killed them. Really. I mean, that's how he talked to me. That's how he treated me, because only one thing mattered to Floyd: get to the quarterback. So that guy, that's who we should be giving those 23 sacks to, because that's how he coached me. And that you can't do that today. You can't do that today with kids.
Those days are long gone in sports, in our society as a whole. It can't be tough on anyone in anything nowadays. But when I talk to anyone, particularly someone as accomplished as you, about sports, I want to talk to you through the lens of success and what it took to get there. So I love right off the bat all the credit that you're willing to give to defensive line coach, your teammates on the defensive line. Truly, it's a team sport. Obviously, you have never shied away from the fact that not only is it a team sport, but that particular group, that Silver Rush, those guys, just the way you fought for one another, you've said on multiple occasions, was special, something you didn't see at any other point in your career.
Yeah, good teams get the best results. And in the game of football, there are teams within teams. Now, finally, 40 some odd years later, due to the guy up in New England, Bill Belichick, people openly discuss that third aspect of the game, special teams. But back early on, it was just kind of somewhere you put the guy that was second team until, you know, that tree of coaches. And for me, the team that I was on, we had a set of rules. And I'll never forget my rookie camp was 6 weeks back then for rookies. And when the veterans came in, of course, we were concerned, you know, all of us rookies, the ones that had made it, hadn't driven off in the middle of the night because it was 2 practices. They were 3 hours long. There was no such thing as shorts or in shells. You didn't walk on the field without a helmet, shoulder pads, and you know, your whole uniform. That was the NFL back then. And Doug English walked up to me and he said, I think guys are talking about you, and I think you might have something in this league. And he said, but you need to understand what it takes. And he said, you practice every day. He said, you don't miss games. And he said, you know, the only way you miss practice is if you have a broken bone. And he said, and even if you have a broken bone, you tape an aspirin to it and you go, rookie. And he looked me right in my eyes. And I'm thinking when I walked up, this guy was serious. And he went on to be serious. You didn't miss practice when you were a member of the Silver Rush. We didn't take days off. And if you broke your arm, Floyd would look at you on the day that we ran gassers on Monday and say, hey, your leg's not broke, get in line. And you had to run with that broken. Needless to say, you know, your arm's swollen, it's pounding. You had to run 3 gassers in 38 seconds or less, or everybody had to run another. Can you imagine the pressure there? That was what we had. And then chemistry, Steve, is so important. We was in that room together. That's where the game plan gets implemented, okay? That's where you learn the defense. But chemistry was formed in my house, in Doug's house on Wednesday night when we're looking at film. We're looking for a weakness on that offensive line so we can prey on him, you know, so we can make him call for his mama, you know, on Sunday afternoon. And God help you, if you were that, oh man, we showed you everything. We grabbed you, we pulled you, you know, we held you. We did everything until they took you out. And in most cases, that was early in the game because back then there was no penalty for defensive holding. So we held, you know. Floyd had a saying, win if you can, lose if you must, but always cheat. And so when I would go down, I'd grab that tackle and pull that tackle so Doug could come around clean. You know, I threw my body to get Doug clean. He did the same for me. Purefoy did the same. And we didn't accept any excuse. If it was your turn to crash down, you crashed. You know, if it was your turn, we finally get John Woodcock out of there because his job was to occupy 2 people. That was his job. Make sure that the guard and the center, 2 300-pounders, 600 pounds of men, drive on you, so the rest of us, and particularly me, so I could come up on the backside of the quarterback and he doesn't see me. It wouldn't work unless Dave Purefoy kept them in the pocket. I left the Lions and went to the Cardinals, and this is no offense on the other guys. We could never establish that because it called for unselfish play. Well, what is the NFL but a selfish business? You know, you do all these things for self to get there, to be one of those 1,600, well, 1,500 in my day, 1,560, because it was only 28 teams at that time. You know, we didn't have Jacksonville and Tennessee and, you know, those kinds of teams. So you were one of the few. And like I said, that initial meeting from Doug, I tell that story and people are like, what do you mean, tape an aspect to it? And I was like, yeah, you had to play. You had to play with a concussion. I mean, we'd hold your hand in the huddle. We'd be like, hey, you're dumb anyway, so just get in here and do what you trained to do, you know? And it was that kind of a relationship that we established off the field, Steve. That's where the chemistry to perform like we did occurs. And Floyd would pay for us to go to dinner every year, you know, once or twice, The defensive line coach, he'd give us his credit card. Can you imagine that? We'd go to some steak place and the bill would be $3,000, just one night. He paid for everything, beers, steaks, the entire night. And all of it came back to him. If you see what I'm saying, these kinds of things, with all the technology that's going on now, where you can see a play on an iPad on the sideline, they're not doing that. They're not doing that kind of a commitment to the game. Every Monday, we grilled or barbecue. I'd barbecue something at my house. And then Tuesday was off day. We went somewhere and we ate together and we watched film. We were looking for that weakness. We started early. And by the way, nothing was crazier than sitting in a dark room with a 16 millimeter projector going, and we'd be in there for hours. We'd watch film from, on Tuesday night, day off, till 11, 12 o'clock at night. When we came in on Wednesday, they hadn't even put the defensive game plan in yet. We already knew who our guy was. We already knew who we were going to, he was going to be our victim. And to quote Oscar Wilde, the game of football can be enjoyed by rough girls, but it's hardly a game for a delicate boy. And that's who we wanted to find. If you showed any signs of weakness, you were ours. Never saw that once I left the Silver Rush.
Wow. I only want to ask really just one more real football question till we get into some of the larger principles throughout your journey. And that is, when you watch highlights of how you played, it's unique, particularly at that time. So I just wanted to ask you just about your style. It almost kind of looked like a basketball player trying to get to the rim. How did you develop that style? And did you have any particular influences?
I can't believe you got that. You got my influence was I wanted to be in the NBA. I was a basketball player through grade school in Newark, New Jersey. There was no graveyard. I mean, there was no grass, so we played football in the graveyard, right? So the influence coming out of the inner city was basketball. A jab step here, and I always marveled at linemen, and particularly the guy came out of Notre Dame back then, Ross Browner, and he had biceps like Superman, and he would grab guys and Reggie White them, pick them up and throw. And I used to think to myself, I don't want to do that. I'd rather go around Fat Boy and get to the guy with the ball. And that was the mentality that I had. And Doug English, he's the guy that helped me understand when I was a rookie. He said, you know what? Some of those moves you do, he said, you're fearless. And he said, I'd imagine an offensive tackle who's used to seeing a traditional pass rusher, right? He's seeing you on film and saying, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with this guy? And that was the whole approach to it. I never wanted to straight out bull rush a 290-pound man. Back then they were skinny, 290, 300 was rare. You rarely saw a tackle that was 300 pounds. But why would I run into a guy's strength? They had the great big old arms, and we used to kid each other and call them Bambi legs. They all had little legs. They didn't squat. They didn't do any leg work. They all had big old arms. They all did bench presses. Well, the secret, Steve, and I'll leave you with this, was the only way you get to use your bench press is if you get knocked on your back. Bench press is not football. It's power cleans, it's squats, it's motion from your hips. And I knew that. And so once I saw a guy who couldn't move his feet, I showed him the kitchen sink. I showed him everything. And that's how it worked for me.
Now, you start your football career with essentially setting the sack record, even if it wasn't recognized until just a couple years later. But let's just say the first 3 years, Pro Bowl player, all pro, defensive rookie of the year, over 50 sacks in 3. I mean, just legitimately the top guy in the NFL. You're 20, like 19, 20, 21, while all this is happening. Can you just speak a little bit about, maybe with the perspective you have now as an adult, how you could ever go about navigating what your life then becomes as being thrust into being a superstar?
Man, I know this may not be popular with a lot of people, but it was God, because I saw things and I was a part of things that, if it had not been for those veterans, going back to Doug and Dexter Bussey and a couple of older players that would invite me over and say, hey man, why don't you do something normal? Like, come on over to my house and my wife will make you some macaroni and cheese. And because we were kids, you're 19, 20 years old, you're still just a kid. My youngest is 31 now. He's still a kid. He's just now, he's developing his family. But me, I don't know how I survived it. I remember going to the Pro Bowl 1978, and it was in LA at the Coliseum. Well, somebody gave me this bright idea. Hey, while you're out there in California, why don't you stay? And I stayed in California, which was a whole nother world. And how I survived those 6 weeks, I don't know, but I really know it was much higher, because I saw things and I did things that, I don't know how, but from the grace of God that I'm even still around. It was the way things were. Studio 54 in New York, we would leave there at 5:30 when it closed and go to what they call after parties. And it would start somewhere else at 6 in the morning. How does that go along with a professional career? That was the way it was then. And anybody that says anything any different, they're not being honest with you. It was tough then. I often say to myself, when I saw the series, The Last Dance with Michael Jordan, I wish that I would have been, we probably wouldn't be discussing me in the Hall of Fame if I would have had the kind of resolve that Jordan had in that hotel room in 1984, when he was invited to follow the group. And Jordan said, no, I came here to play basketball. Y'all go ahead on. And, they had women in the room and other things, activities going on. And Jordan, when I saw The Last Dance, I thought, wow, man, did this touch me? Because Jordan, basically, he wasn't going to be a part of these losers. And he wasn't trying to get accepted. He was trying to put together a winning basketball team. And in my case, the veterans accepted me. And so I just figured, hey, I'll do what they do, the drinking and the hanging out and do what you do. But the one thing I will say about them, they had a rule. And the rule was, if you go out with the boys, you got to get up with the men. Yeah. So, and these guys, like Friday night, oh, you don't go out on Friday, because that's the night that your legs take you through on Sunday. They had all these little sayings and all these kind of things, and you want to be accepted, right? And it was the Detroit Lions, and anybody that knows the history of the Lions, going back to Alex Karras, that was just kind of the image of them. Well, if I could do it all over again in hindsight, I probably would have taken the Jordan approach, and I'd have been like, hey, look, man, I don't really want to be in the group because you guys are losers. You haven't won anything. So, you had 17 sacks as a team last year. Can't tell me anything. And I didn't. So it took me a while till I met my wife to figure out, okay, well, I don't want to be in that group. I want to be in this group. And it had all passed by so fast. I was in St. Louis already, trying to reenact the camaraderie minus the shenanigans. I mean, that's the way you got accepted back then. You did what the veterans did. And if you've ever seen that show, The Last Dance, the series of Michael Jordan, he wasn't that kind of guy. And that's a hard thing to do, because you're going to get ostracized, you're not going to be liked. And I wanted to be liked, and I wanted to be part of the gang. And when you're young, these are the things that I want to share with young guys. Hey, you know, you're there. This career doesn't last long. And you don't, now that I'm a senior, this is pro football purgatory. You know, you don't, you pick one senior out of 9,000 guys, you know what I mean? What's your chances of going into the hierarchy of the Hall of Fame when you don't leave it all on the field? This is where you wind up. You wind up where I'm at, you know? What could I have gone back there and done better? Well, I could have been a better leader. And again, I own everything that happened, and, you know, the lifestyle and the hanging out and the partying and prior to my wife, you know, the single life, you know, pro sports, they're so short, man. If I could do it all over again, I'd pass up on everything because I wouldn't want to be sitting where I am today going, well, you know, I could have had, you know, 13 years or 15 years of a career like that, maybe if I would have preserved this and that. And again, it's second guessing, but when you're 20 years old, those are hard things. Those are tough pills to swallow as a young man, because you know, you've got this, I want to be part of the tradition. And unfortunately, the tradition of the Lions was we didn't win football games. Well, no, specifically that era, we didn't win championships. The tradition that they had formed when they were winning championships were bar brawlers and Alex Karras guys and the cigars and the gambling, and you know what I mean? And that tradition wasn't working anymore, but it was still there if you wanted to be one of the boys, and I did, unfortunately.
So your career ends in 1990. So just for some more context, how do you eventually come around to seeing it this way? You know, are you cognizant at all while you're playing or an athlete? Are you really sort of are you introspective on how things went after you've retired, or does it take distance from the game to really have a different level of clarity?
That's a good question, Steve. What happens is there's a window for an athlete. And if you look, it was something like, I saw one of the statisticians wrote that I reached 99 sacks faster than somebody else in however many games. And there's just so much of that stuff out there, right? And then the door goes, right? And you're not able to do what you used to be able to do when you were 20, 21. And, you know, whatever that age is, however you represent your body, however you take care of your body. I mean, you look at a guy like Brady now, you know, and our guy down here, Drew Brees, these guys are known for taking care of their bodies, okay? There's a window. And after that window, you're doing what I did for 12 years. You're chasing that guy that got 23 sacks. See, because in 1978, nobody knew who I was. They wasn't filming me. They didn't know I was going to give him a head fake and club him and take the inside. They didn't know I was going to line up wider and take the inside. They didn't know that they never had to be concerned about me power rushing them and pushing them back on the quarterback. They needed to be light on their feet. So they started to prepare differently. The back started chipping me and brought the tight end over. We'll see, when you see these things and you look back in hindsight and you're in your 11th year and the Cleveland Browns take a 4th round draft choice and trade for you, and you're sitting there looking at film going, man, just a step quicker and I was there. That's what happens. And then the second part is, yeah, when you look back and people are playing highlights and you see yourself and you think to yourself, there's a highlight in particular, my daughter found it, and it was a move that I invented, and it was called the dead man. And all my teammates, I even did it in St. Louis, and I brought it back out when I went up to Minnesota, and I would come off the ball as fast as I could, and I just stopped. And that tackle would, like, what's he going to do? Boom, then I blow right by him. And nobody else had the courage to do it, because on Monday, if it didn't work, Floyd Peters would be, what the hell is that? And I said, Floyd, that's the same move that I beat him with when we went down to Tampa. And I said, he was ready for it. I said, but watch this next one. And then I would come up and I would do the dead man and I'd spin inside, and so, that window, you're the only guy that can look and see it. And then, by the way, Steve, injuries mount up on you. I think about my 5th year, I tore my abductors and they thought it was my groin. And this is my favorite story to tell. And so when I was in Detroit, for 1 year exactly, when I tore my groin, they injected me in my groin with Novocaine and cortisone every day that I was in the facility. And I mean, a needle about that long, they put it in there and they would move it around. And I can't tell you how, yeah. And sometimes I look down there and I go, the Lions did this to me. No, but no, seriously, that was, you had to get ready and get on the field. And the only thing that I could do for that year was run straight. And of course, everybody that I had put all those moves on, they got even with me. I'll never forget a guy named Mike Ken down in Atlanta. I saw him when he was a rookie and I gave him the blues. Man, after I tore my groin, and he was a really good athlete, belongs in the Hall of Fame too, by the way, from Atlanta, from Michigan, right? Man, I flew off the ball and he shoved me. He was in San Diego then. I think he was the first round pick for the San Diego Chargers. And no, actually, I take that back. It was Jim Lachey who was drafted by San Diego, and he and Mike Kent must have been talking, because I had some good years with both of them. And Munoz, when they were young, when they came in, we were all young men. Man, I tore that groin and I couldn't open up. Like, that year was maybe 83, 84. And I broke my ankle. I'm still on the field, right? Most brutal year I ever had. And halfway through, they moved me over to the left side because we were trying to compensate that torn groin, and keep me on the field, And man, them cats, remember we talked about finding that weak spot? I got to play that role because I was injured. And I mean, all I could do was run straight and they would shove me and I couldn't put my leg out there and balance. So I just go down. And once they saw that, I paid them back in 85 because I came back 100%, but it was a nightmare. It was, every tackle that I had ever had, bunches. Bunches is, tackles have a different mentality. When you beat a guy with a move, you see it all the time. He's mad at himself, right? So unlike the young guys now, I kept doing that same move until he could block it. I wouldn't do anything different. So if you couldn't handle my swim, I swam you until you drowned. So the way they get you back is, they find out you got like a chink in your armor and you're injured. Oh man, they chop your legs, they drop. That's playing offensive line. I deserved it. I did the same to them. Like I said, the game of football is hardly a game for a delicate boy. And so if you're not 100% and you're out there on the field and those offensive linemen sniffed that and they figured it out, they passed it along. And they're sitting there watching the film and they're like, oh, wow, look at this. Oh, oh, Mr. Jiggle his head and Mr. Dead Man move. And what I meant to you when I said to you, bunches, any tackle back then in the old 2-minute drill when they didn't call timeouts, I mean, they didn't have the nutrition that they have now. Guys were 330 pounds and had 6% body fat. They were fat. So their nose would be running. They'd be trying to breathe in that silver dome. People were smoking, smoke up in the top butters. And when they got tired, they got noticeably tired. Well, when the shoe was on the other foot, they remembered. He got 3 sacks on me in a row, or he pulled me down, so Doug English come around, because they go back and see it on the film for the second game. Like we would do that to Tampa. We would pull all kinds of tricks, and they were a run-oriented team. And so in the 2-minute drill, when they had to throw, that wasn't their forte. Or the Bears, that wasn't their forte. They blocked for Peyton. So when they got down by 10 points, it was over. It was your mind. And you had to be superiorly conditioned to get what Floyd said, when they come in bunches. And you might go 2 games where you get 1 sack. And then you get that guy that can't handle those basketball type moves. And you had to take it out on him. You had to get your numbers up. And that's when Doug would call a game. I'd look over at Doug and wave him off and say, I got him. And then, you come in on Monday and everybody be like, well, Al wouldn't share. He had that guy over there and he didn't want to get him off. and that was, that was how we did it. We got ready, Steve. We prepared. I mean, nothing was more important than preparing for that guy. And of course, if he was a guy that was the weak spot, then everybody knew it. And one other thing was, if there was a guy on the line and he moved, or he showed he gave away the snap count, right? We shared that. If a guy like Marino, and I remember telling Dan Marino this at a Pro Bowl, I was like, hey, you lick your hand when you get ready to throw? He was like, yeah, but I lick my hand and hand the ball off sometimes. I was like, yeah, but I'm paying attention to that one. I used to tell coach, I was like, hey, your right leg is out. He's like, no, nobody ever told me that. I was like, yeah, take a look at it. And his right leg was always out when he needed to get back. He didn't care because he wasn't, physically, really athletic. So Bernie just lived with it. But we looked for those kinds of things. We looked for that guy who was on the opposite side as an offensive guard. He was that far off the ball. He's pulling. So we would call a name out, back set. Louie. We worked together. And, when you got older, man, you had to have all those skill sets, Steve, because you just weren't as fast as you were. My groin never, ever healed 100%. You're never going to be 100% when you play in the NFL. And that's another one of I call that my Bubba-ism. I always laugh when I hear a guy in pro football saying, well, I'm not 100%. And I'm thinking, dude, when you retire, you're not going to be 100%. The only time you're going to be 100% in the National Football League is when you're a rookie and minicamp is over and you get that extended period from June to July. And once it starts, man, you're injured for life. And if you don't know that, then you're in for a rude awakening. But you don't get to be 100% in this business. And that's probably still the same today. That part is not going to change. So for you young guys out there that's talking about, being 100%, forget about it. That's the nature of the game.
Sure is. So we started this with my last question, rather, with that window closing, right?
Yeah.
And what that meant to you. How much has that, if at all, fueled you in your life after being a pro athlete? Because from the top, I mentioned, for anyone that's not aware, you've been involved in different things that aren't at all similar. You've had a very diversified approach to the things that you've decided to pursue. So the aspect of what you just talked about, of seeing that window close, maybe playing a little bit of that what if game, how much did that fuel you in your pursuits in life after being a pro athlete?
That's a great question. I knew that I had everything inside of me that I needed to make a living, to be specific. And I tried broadcasting and I tried some other things. And it just gave me the sense that I was relying on football. And this is no offense to anybody. Like, I think Strahan and Howie Long, they are great for the game. All the guys that are on the shows. But when I did it, I found that I was doing just as much homework to be prepared in my craft like you do, and all the back work. I was still relying on football, and for me, right? And so what I did was I opened up a franchise. At the time, it was called Mailboxes, etc. And me and my wife, we owned and operated it, and we just kind of got a feel. So what I learned from football was I needed to be early. The hours were, they opened at 9 and close at 6. We would be open at 7:30, and we would close when the rest of Mailboxes, etc. people, win if you can, lose if you must, but always cheat. When the rest of the people would close early on a Friday, I would close late. And these were things that I got from sports. I got this from football. I got it that, you had to come to work with a lunch pail early, and you had to work late. And you hear about this with guys like Brady and all. And so I carried that with me. And one of my least favorite things that I would run into is different aspects of business. People would always take that time to point out, well, this is not the football field. And I would immediately quite back to them, well, then why do you use so many football metaphors? Why do you say things like the ball's in my court, or it's 1st and 10, or touchdown, or you scored the big one? No, what they wanted me to do was feel like I was that rookie again in the business world, because everybody's looking for an edge. And I just never bought into it. I always figured, man, I've been knocked out cold by John Hannah and got up. And, as embarrassing as that might have seemed, I picked myself up and I went back out there and continued my career and continued to, learn from that, not closing on a trap play. When the tackle goes down, I close. And I use those kinds of metaphors because we do the same thing in the real world. We learn. COVID's taught us all something. And the word is adaptability. I mean, I think about how many plane flights I used to be on. And even now, I do my QVC from home via Skype. I'll never go back to flying. I'm thinking QVC can do far more airings instead of having us in studio personally. They haven't missed a beat because they adapted to it. I've been doing that my entire life, Steve. And now what I'm starting to do is I'm starting to go back and grab things like my artwork, the sketchings that I've done, all the t-shirts that I did. I'm starting to copyright them. And who hasn't had legal experiences throughout their lives? So I've been kind of documenting that, and I've written a legal drama series, and I'm working on 30 some odd years into bringing it into a one-pager. So I've learned that I left out one thing too. I tried to retire, after the whole Shark Tank thing. I thought, I'm just going to go away, ride into the sunset. I moved to Florida in 2015, and I was never really a big drinker. I never really liked drinking. And then I found myself drunk every day by noon because I was retired. And, my wife and I finally, my wife and I, we had one of them tough conversations. She was like, this doesn't seem to be working out well for you. And it just turns out that I'm one of those lucky people that I realized I'm not supposed to sit around. I'm not supposed to dial it back. Yeah, I don't work 100 hours a week like I did when I was in my 30s and my 40s and I was in the restaurant business. But I realized it's a good thing for me that I can't retire because just too much time on my hands. It's the devil's workshop. So I've been blessed in that sense that, have I ever written a book? But I do know this, that I don't want to go to my grave with this script in my head and in my heart and my experiences. I want it on screen. I don't want these animated characters that I've been sketching since the 6th grade. And I just so happen to have had them in a suitcase. Well, you know, I want to do something with them. And so in order to do that, Steve, I had to learn how to copyright all this information. And actually, copywriting is not a joke. I mean, you literally have to have every single detail in order. And people that are out there that are writers, you know, I'm interested in how do you take your ideas like a writer and you put it either in a book or on a screen. I'm more interested in the screen part because I feel like if I do the book, then the big guys in Los Angeles are going to say, whoa, that's a great idea. Why don't I do that? And then I'm going to have myself another legal battle. And I don't really want to do that. And so I think it has to do with a conversation that I had with one of the retired players, Anthony Blaylock. And I said to him, I said, he was thinking about going into the restaurant business. And everybody had told him, no, don't do it. And I said to him, I said, hey, AB, well, what does that say about the people that have successfully been making it and adapted to it during COVID? And, you know, we had that conversation and, you know, he's going forward. I didn't have anything to do with it. I just gave him a different perspective. I'm like, well, why don't you find out what they're doing? You know, what are these people doing? You know, they're doing carry out and Uber Eats and, you know, whatever it is that they're doing, mimic it, do it, and do it better than them. And that's kind of how I've lived my life. And, you know, I use yoga, I use meditation. And Steve, you've heard me refer to God. I learned that some of the things and places I've been, December of 2019, I had a 9-hour surgery on my spine. They literally opened up my spine and carved it out. And the doctor told me that I would never do this. And what that told me was, I like challenges. And that's what I think the young guys have to realize. You were something before you played pro football to make you go into those weight rooms and run those sprints and run the distance and compete and get knocked down and get beat and the broken bones and the hours upon hours to get to that point. You don't just throw that away. That's part of what's in your DNA. We don't quit. So don't quit now. Don't think because the formal game is over that the competition is over. It just started. I'll be 65 in December. I've never been more competitive than I am now. I'm at the height of my competitiveness because I don't want to go to my grave with things that I left on the table. Nothing, whatever it is. And I'm learning how to do these things because of Zoom and because of, you know, this computer that you and I are talking on now that maybe wasn't as popular 2 years ago. Look at Amazon. Look at what happened to Amazon sales during COVID. That's the line we have to put ourselves at. Line ourselves up with what's being done. And whatever you do, by all means, don't leave out the possibilities. Dream big. It takes the same amount of energy to think small as it does to dream big. It doesn't cost you a monthly payment to own that ocean cruiser out there, that Italian boat that sleeps 26. You're dreaming it. Why would you say to yourself, oh, I'll never be able to afford a boat like that? Why not? Why not? Who's better than you? Did Brady get something that you and I didn't get? He put the work in, and he still is putting the work in. So that's what we have to do. We have to put the work in. And again, we have to focus on the next thing. And COVID, if it didn't teach us anything, is don't say you've seen it all, because I've never seen anything like this. Never. So I'm not surprised by it anymore. I'm not frightened of it anymore. It's one of those challenges. And, I've had my shots, and I highly recommend for people to go out, get vaccinated, man. You don't know what's in a hot dog. You don't know what's in potted meat or spam, yet you eat it. So walking around saying, oh, you don't know what's in a vaccination, well, then stop eating hot dogs then, because you don't know what's in those. That's, it's, it's, it's the truth, you don't know what's in a sausage. You think you do, but that's my approach to people, man, to us. And let's get back on the same team in this country, man. We're missing the boat. We're missing the boat. We really are. I live in Florida, and all this dividedness, it makes me sick. Doug English came from Austin, Texas. Played with a guy named Kenny Sanders. I am not lying. He was a member of the Klan. He grew up that way. But Kenny Sanders, when I came to Detroit, Kenny Sanders respected me. We played hard together. And all of us. I played with a guy who grew up in Oregon. His name is Ken Fantetti. He went to Wyoming. We hated each other. And he and I were talking recently, and he said, man, I couldn't help but look across at you in that huddle and remember that you were a Colorado State Ram. And I said, yeah, I used to think the same thing about you, man. I said, but we were both Detroit Lions, and we were like this, And that's what we have to do in this country, Steve. We got to remember we're on the same team. We may not like the choices, you benched our quarterback or that quarterback. Well, the next quarterback here that you put in there, that's the president, or that's who's in charge. And you got to respect that, whether you like it or not. That's what I know is the result of being on a team. You play together and you perform together, and teams get the best results. And I'll leave you with that, man.
And although our conversation is a lot of what does it take for individual success and team success, I guess my hope is that when each person understands that they can achieve success, they become the best version of themselves. And when we all sort of try to get down that path, I think that in some small way can help us as a country kind of get back on the right path. But we got to overcome some hurdles and some differences that, man, a couple of years ago, I didn't think any of this would have ever put us in a position where we are today. So hopefully this is just a speed bump, and
sure.
we're going to get over it.
I got a secret I wanted to leave you with, man. I have a secret, and are you good with secrets?
I can keep it, but if you tell me right now, I don't know if I can keep it.
All right, well, I'm gonna come in real close and tell you this.
Hit me.
All right. So, you know how athletes are always, in my case, we walk out of camp for more money, or you hear the guys saying what they deserve or should be. After I was an all-pro and rookie of the year, they should have tore up that contract and gave me whatever I wanted, right? The secret is I would have played for free. See, Russ Thomas and the Lions and the Cardinals and the Vikings and the Cleveland Browns, if they had visited with me on the right level, they would have found out I loved playing the game so much, they didn't really have to pay me anything. That's my secret. That's pretty good, huh? Yeah.
That is pretty good.
Just to beat up on another guy. Hey, man, go get the quarterback. I would have played for absolutely no money. They just never took the time to check and see what it was that made me tick.
I love it. Well, Bubba, I know we're running up against it for time here. Thank you for sharing your secret with me. Thank you so much for taking the time today. Again, congratulations. I hope this, the strangest thing to me, I was about to say, I hope that the recent news and you getting the credit that you deserve gets you enough momentum to get you into the Hall of Fame. It's strange to me that something that you kind of had to mentally get past and focus on other things now kind of gets put back in the center of your life again, when it was just sort of in the back of your mind. Hopefully that does not distract from any screenplays that might be getting written soon. But man, it was certainly a pleasure to hear your perspective. And again, just want to thank you for your time.
Thanks, bro. Have a great day. And remember, that's our secret.